factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the past were all learned with workers' blood and strike song.
Hello everyone, welcome to the April 4th Coalition show. This is the September 23rd edition of the April 4th Coalition show. Our mission statement is we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights, and we are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. Today, we have Susan Rose, Rachel Branch, Michael Wilbur joining me. We're going to miss having Elizabeth Manns. She's not able to be here with us, and so I'll stumble through trying to host and whatever. But one thing, the April 4th Coalition stands by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but we highlight Article 23 that has to do with workers' rights. So Section 1, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment.
Everyone without any discrimination has a right to equal pay for equal work.
Number 3, everyone who works has a right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for herself or himself and his or her family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection.
Number 4, everyone has a right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his or her interests.
Well, thank you all for joining us. And Rachel, I remember you sent me an email and you were highlighting what was going on with Stewart's Hospitals. It's a nationwide private for-profit hospital system that happens to have a number of hospitals here in Massachusetts, and they filed for bankruptcy. And you sent me an article about that, and we thought we were going to highlight that and talk about it. And because we went through that similar situation here in North Adams, having a hospital closure. So we have a couple of videos that we wanted to show, and one is I think it's a WBZ news report with sort of an oversight of what's going on. Let's watch that one.
With breaking news.
The state stepping in, securing new owners for 5 hospitals that belong to Stewart Healthcare. Now, Stewart says these deals were in the works, and the Healy administration is now making sure they happen. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Lisa Hughes.
And I'm David Wade. The state is actually seizing one hospital to make sure its future is secure. But as WBZ's Christina Hager shows us, the state will still not take any steps to save 2 hospitals now scheduled to close.
As the controversy over the sudden closure of Stewart hospitals heats up, a new plan.
I'm pleased to say we're closing the book on Stewart once and for all in Massachusetts. Good riddance and goodbye.
Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey announcing a deal that will not save Kearney Hospital and Neshoba Valley, still set to shut their doors by the end of this month. But it will pump $30 million into a plan to save 5 other hospitals across the state over 6 campuses.
I am taking action today to seize control of St. Elizabeth's through an eminent domain proceeding. That will facilitate the transition of St. Elizabeth's to a responsible new owner.
If the deals go through as planned, Boston Medical Center would take over St. E's and Good Samaritan in Brockton. Lawrence General Hospital will take over Holy Family Hospitals in Haverhill and Methuen. And Lifespan would assume operations at Morton Hospital in Taunton and St. Anne's in Fall River.
It's just perfect. I can walk to here if I have to.
Jerry Jellison here at St. E's for an eye exam hopes the deal works.
There's a lot of people in this part of Boston, and we need something like this.
I've been coming here since I was an infant, so yeah, it's really important to us.
With this, Healy joining critics who have lined up in protest of what they call greed and negligence on the part of Stewart, which they say put vital healthcare resources in serious jeopardy. Stewart also owns Norwood Hospital, which had to shut down because of flooding. The governor says this deal does not impact Norwood, that would be determined at a later date. As for Stewart, we have not received any response to our inquiries. In Boston, Christina Hager, WBZ News.
Well, it's just awful what the people throughout the Commonwealth are going through, similar to what we went through for 10 years here, having a hospital closed without the proper notification. You know, they just gave us, 3 days notice? And they're not giving adequate notice in these hospitals either.
But these hospitals, no, excuse me.
I worked at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, and that was 50 years ago, and we had enough help. Everything went well, but it looks like it's disintegrated. Because I know I worked there, but that was 50 years ago.
Yeah, our big complaint was, hospitals are too big to fail. It's one of those things. And to have hospitals that are for profit, meaning that someone's skimming from the top for their own well-being, rather than just a hospital there to serve the needs of the people in the community. It's just, it's unthinkable.
It enrages me to think that there's any use of the word profit when you're talking about health care for people. And I think the CEO of this company, I think I heard on the radio, there might be criminal charges against him, and that he was in Paris at the Olympics and, all this. And there are similarities between our hospital and the hospitals here, and that there's any for-profit entity as part of a hospital system is just not acceptable. It's unconscionable, really. And North Adams Regional Hospital was 129, financially comfortable, financially okay for 129 years. I think some of these hospitals go way, way back too. And it's the part of the problem is the ability of the CEO and the boards to make investments outside of their community, outside of the hospital. And I think that's one of the major things that has happened. But this community always got together and had balls and dinners and all kinds of fundraisers and never let this hospital go under.
Right.
And none of these should be. This is just horrendous. And it's across the country too.
Like recently reported in the Boston Globe, it said for Stewart CEO, jet travel, yacht adventures, as the company crumbled, corporate funds covered the De La Torta's luxury lifestyle. Stewart Healthcare CEO Ralph De La Torta and his top deputies jetted last summer to Jamaica for an escape from the scorching heat in Dallas. Among the worries they left behind, unpaid bills that were piling up at headquarters. They were traveling all over the world using the money like it was their own piggy bank.
And then they blame it on critical access, or they blame it on Medicaid, or they blame it on Medicare, not reimbursement. I mean, you see people, 10 years to get critical, I don't even know if we have complete critical care access here now. We do?
We do have
But yeah, 10 years, why? Why did it take 10 years? And, all the politicos standing up and, like, rah, 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 we've got our hospital open, but we are still not a full service hospital. Maybe it'll come back. But I think one of the questions community members have to continue to ask is, how much is the CEO making? And are board members being paid? And are any investments? There has to be clarity and transparency in what is happening in hospitals. And you cannot keep blaming people who are poverty-stricken for the state of their hospitals.
You mentioned that CEO is in trouble. Well, Senator Bernie Sanders in Washington was having hearings on his Stewart's hospitals, and they subpoenaed the CEO to come, but he refused to appear because he said, well, we're in bankruptcy. I can't talk about these things. So they're going to push for a vote of the full Senate to put this man in jail for contempt of Congress. But during those hearings, there was a nurse from one of the hospitals, and we have a videotape. Why don't we see what that videotape of this nurse talking about what it was like in that for-profit hospital, what was happening.
Members of this committee, my name's Ellen McInnes. I'm a nurse at St. Elizabeth's Medical Center in Boston. I've been there 26 years. For the first 12 years I worked at St. Elizabeth's, we were operated by the Archdiocese of Boston. And then Cerberus Capital came along, Stewart came along, and it's been downhill since then. We have 2,800 Massachusetts Nurses Association nurses and healthcare professionals working at Stewart hospitals. I'm proud and honored to be representing them today. We hope that we can provide a unique perspective on this issue because we are the front line providers. We provide more than 90% of the care delivered at Stewart hospitals. The corporatization and commodification of healthcare is the guiding ethos of Stewart. It's their one and only priority. And it has led to horrific suffering and harm to our patients, the people who take care of our patients, and our communities. The immediate and most debilitating impact of the ownership of Stewart was the Stewart's tendency to understaff units whenever and wherever they can. I spent 20 years working in the emergency department at St. Elizabeth's, and I can tell you we always struggled to have enough staff, enough equipment, enough supplies to keep our patients safe. Probably one of the biggest impacts is after a patient is admitted to the hospital, they end up sitting in the emergency department for hours to sometimes a couple of days because the units where they should be admitted and safely cared for are not staffed. This chronic understaffing has resulted in preventable harm and even death. The Boston Globe just ran a front-page expose highlighting some of the tragic consequences at Stewart hospitals. This included 2 patients at Holy Family Hospital in Methuen who died in the emergency department because they weren't immediately assessed and they weren't monitored, and that relates directly to severe understaffing of that department. At Good Samaritan, 2 patients died after spending hours in a significantly understaffed emergency department. One 81-year-old gentleman came in for chemotherapy for his pancreatic cancer, and by the time staff got to him, he was dead. There were 95 patients in that emergency department on that shift, and only 11. Absurd to think that 11 nurses can care for that number of patients. At another Stewart hospital, sadly enough, a 28-year-old gentleman came in. He was in an acute mental health crisis. He was placed in restraints for his own safety, and there was nobody available to closely monitor him, which is what statute provides for. And when he went into distress, nobody was there to rescue him, and he's dead. All of these were preventable. We also have seen Stewart fail to provide the supplies and the equipment that we need. Either the supplies don't come through the front door because we're on a credit hold and nobody will bring them to us. Also, our equipment it's not properly maintained. We have IV pumps and computers with battery lives of 7 to 10 seconds because the maintenance just hasn't been done. During my time in the emergency department, I worked nights. There were nights that we didn't have any Similac or Pedialyte or even diapers. I can think of 2 separate occasions where staff went out in the middle of the night to a 24-hour store to get those supplies. Also, we frequently didn't have food, kitchens locked up. And I personally have given my my dinner, my meals to patients, and staff has chipped in and sent out and had food brought in for patients. Sadly enough, sometimes babies die, newborn babies die, and the practice is to place the baby's remains in a bereavement box and take it to the morgue. Stewart didn't pay the vendor, and there weren't any bereavement boxes. And nurses were forced to put babies' remains in cardboard shipping boxes. These nurses put their own money together and went to Amazon and brought the bereavement boxes. Gosh, there's so much more to say. Probably the most tragic and what finally blew the lid off all this was the death of a 39-year-old woman who came to the hospital, had an absolutely normal childbirth, was bleeding. She may have been saved by a device known as an embolism coil. There weren't any in the hospital. There hadn't been any in the hospital for weeks. They had been repossessed by the vendor. She died. Stewart has also caused the closure of Quincy Medical Center. I grew up in Quincy. This was very close to my aunt. And now Neshoba and Kearney Hospital. Kearney Hospital sees more than 30,000 patients a year. Boston EMS takes 6,000 patients a year to Kearney Hospital. Where are they going to go? We don't have the capacity in Boston for this. I know we have a lot of hospitals. We also have a lot of patients. And just to be clear, we need not to let this happen again. And thank you for coming together. And it's my sincerest hope that you can put an end to this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Spraken.
Wow. Oh my God. I think that the nurses should have brought this to the attention, even though they did such a wonderful job. You know, when there's negligence, probably the other hospitals would have closed and it wouldn't have gone to that extreme. But I commend these nurses for what they did do.
Oh, I have entirely different. I just, it's just unconscionable, that word I keep using. But, I mean, these are horror shows that they're talking about. And I have a very close friend, years and years ago, she was a supervisor at a hospital in Bridgeport, Connecticut. She had to resign because there wasn't enough staff. She couldn't stay because she knew somebody was going to die. I would imagine there are people, nurses there, who left because they couldn't. But I can imagine the lawsuits are going to be huge, and to think people are dying because they can't get care. And I hold elected officials, and I hold the corporate entities that set up the mechanisms that allow hospitals to be in this position. It's just unthinkable that you could have a for-profit. And of course, that's part of what happened to our North Adams Regional Hospital, was investing outside the community. But I didn't know, this is the first time I knew that you could have a for-profit hospital. I know about the financial entities, but that are investments separate from the nonprofit part. But I didn't know you could have a for-profit hospital. And to think those numbers, the numbers of hospitals, the patients that are affected, it's horrible.
Right. I mean, there's other systems in the world. Other countries have other systems. Some countries have where the government owns all the hospitals, similar to our VA system. In the VA system, the government owns those hospitals, employs the doctors, and takes care of those patients. Of course, there's a big push by Republicans. They want to privatize it. And at Project 2025, that's what they want to do, is privatize veterans hospitals, privatize care. But the veterans hospitals in this country a lot of our doctors are trained there. That's where they go after they graduate from college. They go work for the VA hospitals, and then they branch out after they get their time in. It pays off their loans or whatever, and it's a great system, similar to the system they have in England with the NSA, the National Health Service.
But our veterans are not getting the care that they should be getting. And now they've got ways that you have to go to another, an outside entity, an outside doctor. I mean, there are system problems right there.
They're pushing that way, the same way. There's people within the government, and I tend to think that the majority of them are Republicans.
But it isn't
or
the majority.
corporate, that they're pushing towards having like Medicare Advantage, which is a privatization of Medicare. And it's the same thing, this whole push
It's a
of,
nightmare.
right, it is. Once you get in there, you have a hard time getting out. But we need to treat healthcare like we treat the Defense Department. The Defense Department, we don't audit the Defense Department. There's no question about how much money we spend for defense. You know, well, let's say that the hospitals are part of our defense. That's, you know, why not just have that budget? You know, what every hospital needs, the government will provide that.
Look at the subcontracting from the Defense Department. When you and I and all of us have talked about health care for all, universal health care, and the fear-mongering over Social Security, the fear-mongering and the money we have for bombs and war profiteering is, there's that word again, unconscionable, a travesty. And we are not taking care of the needs of everyday people in our country. And see, I push most of that right on entrenched politicians that won't get out and won't do the work and holding on to their jobs. Right. I'm generalizing, but yes.
Well, it comes upon the voters, though, to organize, in it doesn't have to be all of them, but we need to get a certain percentage of people to put their feet to the fire and say, this is what we want.
Well, you know what you want? You want to go back, you know, more than 50 years and have more than enough help. And then I saw 20 years later or more that once somebody left, they never replaced them. And it came to the point where even the young people where I worked were having a hard job keeping up. And I had to keep up also because I was much older than them. And my husband actually resigned a job as a department head because he didn't have enough help. And anyways, I felt, hey, I might lose my license, you know?
Right.
And that was another part too.
Or be sued.
Yeah, well, that was the problem. And we had to have at least $1 million. And so I don't know what happened years ago, you know, what it was that changed this whole thing.
Well, I think that at one time, I think, Rachel, you can attest to it, your own family, the most affluent families in the community were part of the community.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and they saw it. There wasn't a big distinction, but now we have people like Elon Musk and these billionaires wanting to be trillionaires. They have nothing in touch with the people, everyday people, and they don't care. They think, oh, we can have for-profit hospitals. I mean, it doesn't affect me. It won't affect the people I'm around. But they're not part of our community. You know,
I talk about my great-grandfather, Arthur Gallup, and I say that if you're blessed with great wealth, you have a responsibility, and he gave away a lot anonymously. But those families that had, you know, extraordinary wealth in this community, they were part of building the hospital. But they, like you said, they were community. They were part of everything. It wasn't like every single person had a stake in our hospital from the day it was started. You know, to sustain that for 129 years, it's incredible.
I don't know who told me the story, but, you know, we used to have over 100 beds up here at the North Adams Hospital, and say Dr. Spitzer would see a man that maybe he was down on his luck, maybe he had some problem with alcohol, or he had some issue. Well, he didn't have a place to sleep that night or something, he'd just send him to the hospital, and there would be a bed for him to stay at. There was enough room, you know. It's, you know, a lot of it is too, yeah, and I remember we had one attorney say we're a very litigious society, that everyone's afraid of being sued, you know, so there's a lot of caution in what we do. But I think we really
I
have
think
to.
since 1980, it changed to a me, and greed and profiteering. I mean, look at the war profiteering. It's just phenomenal. But the greed today is, you know, we don't hear a lot of like kindness and compassion and empathy, and nobody can decide where they're born, but you still, and we know that zip codes matter where you're born, but it matters what you do wherever you're from. And a lot of people can't get involved because they're so poverty stricken. Here you are, you know, the root is, you can't get people involved in a community if they're struggling just day to day
Right.
to make ends meet. Yes.
Right, trying to find food and shelter
Yep.
and work. You know, we talk about it a lot. You know, we call ourselves the April 4th Coalition because that was the anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination or murder. Martin Luther King, you know, had this saying that he had about, you know, he didn't mind having rich people. He said as long as they didn't try to get rich so fast. He didn't mind if they were rich and they wanted to increase their wealth, but not do it at a rapid pace, because if they could slow down getting richer, there would be money that they could pay in taxes, and other people could share in that wealth. You know, like you have these billionaires now, they can't get enough quick enough. They you know, they'll go anywhere to avoid paying taxes or to contribute.
And there's Congress who's allowing.
They want to set up private communities even. They want to set up private entities where they don't have to pay any taxes, the minimum taxes.
And the rest of us are dispensable.
Yeah. All over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on in Gaza, and in the West Bank, you know, that could be us. Talk about us losing hospitals here in Mass. Us losing hospitals. The hospitals in Gaza, they're obliterated. You know, we need to fight to get, you know, hospitals to those people too, all over the world. It's no.
Something is radically going to happen.
Right. You got one of the poorest countries in the world, or Palestine, the poorest people in the world, and two of the richest countries in the world at war with them. You know, we have to take a step back and get away from the militarization. We have to get rid of the racism and just the greed.
Well, each of us has to do whatever we can do.
Well, we're running down to 25 minutes.
It's really power to the people, and, you know, we need help from everybody to try to do something.
Keep moving forward.
Yeah, power to the people. It needs to come back to the people, or get to the people. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, thank you.
There's power in the factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the past were all learned with workers' blood. The strikes of the bosses we must fight for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches full of mud, war's always been the boss's wife.